Good afternoon and thank you and sorry for the slight delay. Welcome to Cambridgeshire County Council's Children and Young People's Committee. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures or share on social media during this meeting. Please, though, can everyone present turn their phones and laptops and anything else to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. We have no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I'll adjourn the meeting and we will leave the room by the side doors and use the external fire exit to the assembly point in the car park. And thank you for the slight delay. Welcome to Cambridgeshire County Council's Children and Young People's Committee. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public. I would like to remind everyone present this meeting will be live streamed, hopefully only once, and a recording will be placed on the council's website in perpetuity for all of your offspring to see. And I will adjourn this meeting for 2 hours, every 2 hours for a short comfort break. Hopefully that's only the once. Item one is apologies for absence, declarations of interest, and Rishenda, the Democratic Services Officer. Do we have any reports, please?
Thank you, Chair. So apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Boulat, who is substituted by Councillor Black, Councillor Hoy, who is substituted by Councillor Gowing, from Councillor Maguire, from Councillor Taylor, who is substituted by Councillor Sanderson, Councillor Thompson, who is substituted by Councillor Coutts, and Co-opted Member Dr. Andy Stone, who represents the Roman Catholic Diocese of East Anglia.
Thank you and welcome to those attending for the first time. I hope you'll enjoy the afternoon and those who are absent, I hope they're doing something equally beneficial. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest this afternoon? I see no hands. Item 2, we're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting from the 27th of June as an accurate record. Is everyone happy to approve? Anna?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to question on page 3 of our full agenda, it's item 159 under draft residential services strategy. In the response to questions from members, officers said various things, and the first of the bullets said, if I can just enlarge it, acknowledged that the number of young people in residential care homes was going up, while the overall number of children in care in the county was going down. Now, I'm not sure that's actually correct. It may have been what was said in the meeting, but the number of Cambridgeshire children in care is actually slightly increasing. So, for example, if we're taking, this was June data, we only had back to August 2022, but for example, in August 2022, it was 642 children in care. And then in June 2023, it was 645. And actually, since then in July, it was 650. But the number of those children looked after in Cambridgeshire may be going down if more young people are being looked after out of county. So I just wondered if officers could clarify that and come back, and I'm quite happy if that's done at a later date and in writing if you prefer. It's just that I'm not sure it was correct at the time it was said.
Yeah, I'll definitely come back to you with with a bit more analysis about that figure over time. The difficulty with that figure is it fluctuates so much. It fluctuates on a daily basis. But to get the right picture over time, you're doing the right thing by looking at the longer term projections. But I will get back to you with a more detailed analysis about what the picture looks like over a year or two.
I was looking at the children in care scorecard that comes to corporate parenting. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. With that exception, are we happy to take minutes as approved?
Yep.
Brilliant. Thank you. An updated action log was also included in the published papers. Do we have any questions on the action log? Councillor Hay, please.
Yes, I'd noticed on a couple of the actions, there's nothing to tell us what action's been taken, whether it's ongoing or whatever. I'm referring in particular to action 159, where we asked how long children and young people in county's care were spending in residential homes. There's nothing against that. And action 162, which was to provide further information around anticipated numbers of students at the new social work academy.
I think I'm right in saying they're ongoing, but we can check that and then change it. Is that all right, Rashenda? Thank you. Okay. Item, in which case we'll take that as noted with those to be amended. Item 3. Item 3 is petitions and public question time. We've received 2 requests to speak this month. Both requests were received after the deadline for public speakers to register, but I have on this occasion decided to exercise my discretion as chair to accept both questions. Copies of these questions have been published on the meeting webpage and were circulated electronically to committee members for information. I think that was only this morning, so I do appreciate if you haven't had a chance to read them yet. We will hear the first question now. Do we have public speaker joining us, Rashenda? No. In which case, we'll hear the first question now. The second one relates to item 7, the special educational needs services and safety valve, and will be heard when we get to that item. So because they have been received after the deadline, both questions today will receive a written response within 10 working days of this meeting, which will be added onto the minutes and circulated to members. Rashenda, if you could read Mr. Carpen's question for us, please.
Mr. Carpen writes, The chair of the Children and Young People Committee responded to my public question at Cambridge City Council's East Area Committee on Citizenship Studies GCSE for Cambridgeshire. Mr. Carping gives a YouTube link for the question and the response by Mr. Goodliff. I also tabled a question about citizenship studies in the lifelong learning sector to the Combined Authority, and their response is in the responses document on the Combined Authority website. And again, a link is given. With only 145 students in Cambridgeshire having taken the GCSE in citizenship studies in 2022, what assessment has the County Council made of the distribution of places across the county that offer citizenship studies at GCSE? Please could I urge the County Council to lobby the academy chains across the county to work together and employ some specialist teachers that could cover more than one school in order to make the GCSE in citizenship studies available.
Whilst I can't ask the committee if they have any questions of clarification, I'm sure we can send those on to Mr. Carpen in future if there are. Jonathan Lewis, our Director of Education, is joining us just to explain our response to this. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr. Carpen for raising this concern. We encourage all secondaries in the county to offer as wide a breadth of possible subjects for all our pupils. This is, however, in the context of teacher shortage, financial constraints, and an accountability framework that places greater focus on a limited number of subjects. All secondary schools in Cambridgeshire are part of Academy Trust, but we'll certainly pass on the helpful suggestion Mr. Carpen makes around sharing specialist teachers across the trust or within a local area.
Thank you, which takes us to item 4. Item 4 is the supported accommodation services for young people in care aged 16 plus. Our commissioning manager, Chris Howard, is joining us remotely for this item. Chris, assuming everyone has already read this, would you briefly introduce this report for us, please?
Thank you and good afternoon. Just can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, that's perfect.
Good. Okay, good. So thank you. Yeah, and apologies for not being able to be there in person. So today we're asking the committee to endorse the re-tendering process for our supported accommodation contract and for delegated responsibility for awarding the executive and executing the contract for the provision of supported accommodation services framework for young people in care aged 16 and 17 years old, starting on the 1st of April 2024, and any extension periods to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families, Martin Purbrick. Supported accommodation until this point has also been referred to as unregulated accommodation and has been the focus of increased scrutiny from central government and has received a lot of immediate attention during this time. At that time, in 2020, it was considered that there were around 3,000 providers operating nationally within the sector. And for Cambridgeshire County Council, this sector offers support to around 15% of our children in care population on a yearly basis. In early 2021, it was confirmed by the Department for Education and Ofsted, the sector would become subject to national minimum standards. They would engage in a programme to deliver this. And in November 2022, Ofsted held webinars that detailed the process that would be implemented to regulate this sector. We are now at the point where these regulations are being implemented. On October the 28th, all providers currently operating within the sector are required to submit their Ofsted registration. And on the 1st of April 2024, Ofsted will begin implementing inspections of these providers. We are retendering at this point to ensure all of our contracts and documentation is in line with the new regulations, resulting in us being legally compliant. The current supported accommodation contract started in October 2018, and we are retendering at the 5-year point of this contract in order to be in line with the new standards. Supported accommodation provides support depending on the needs of the young people, that is flexible and mutually agreed and works in partnership with other agencies. The aims of this service will not change, and these are to enable young people to become more independent whilst living in supported accommodation by developing knowledge, skills, attitudes and behaviours that then enable them to sustain independent living and make a smooth transition to adulthood. The service builds resilience and strength in young people and enables them to live in the community whilst ensuring they are fully involved in their planning and delivery of their own care plans. All providers offering homes to these young people of Cambridgeshire will be required to register with Ofsted in line with our new contracts and service specifications. And I now open the floor to any questions that people may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton first, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the paper, for a really good, clear paper. It's just a small question, and it's right towards the end of 4.3, where you say the information we've gained from this process that all the providers offering homes to the young people of Cambridgeshire will be registering with Ofsted. And this is under risk. So are you saying then that there is a risk that they won't have registered and therefore you won't be able to use them as providers of supported living, supported provision? Not quite sure what your point is there.
So the risk is that a provider would not register, in which case it would then be, under the new regulations, illegal for us to place a child with them. Throughout the process, we have constantly engaged with the market on probably a monthly basis to check where providers are with their registration process. We get updates every month from Ofsted around the providers that have registered and completed the process. So there is a small risk that some providers would not register. But for us, we're managing that risk by being in constant contact with the market. We know which children are placed with which providers and have mitigated all the risks in relation to that. But all of the information that we have from the market at the moment is the providers where we have children and that we predominantly use are registering.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Slatter, please.
Yes, following up on that, really, it's obviously a good idea to be checking on such things before the children are put in care into the caring hands of a provider, and not to be just responding to problems. And we welcome that. I hope that the Ofsted will be fully funded and staffed to do these checkups. I would welcome some report back on this, because this is crucial in the lives of our looked after children. And if there are some of the providers that somehow slip up on the bureaucracy and in any way it's falling short, I would like to be told that all is going well, rather than, we obviously hope it will, but perhaps a little follow up. It may just be a to note, but I think we do need to be following up on this, as it's a new arrangement for our children. Thank you.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. And just to assure committee, in the same way we are very diligent and monitor our children's homes with Ofsted, we will be taking the same approach to these services with our Ofsted in relation to supported accommodation.
Thank you. I guess we can take it forward either here or at corporate parenting as to the numbers and outcomes of those Ofsteds. Councillor Hay, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to understand a bit more. Under 2.7, it goes on about the different types of bids, lots 1, 2, 3 and 4. Lot 1 goes on about properties with specific needs-led support determined by referral, whereas lots 2, 3 and 4 mention generic needs-led support model per property. What exactly support are we talking about in the different types of lots? And what's the difference between determined by referral or by property?
Yeah, so for option lots 3 and 4, will support our separated migrant children. So our separated migrant children have different needs and requirements to children that have entered care within Cambridgeshire. So we separate out the needs in relation to those lots 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 in that way. They are generally social care led needs. So it's really around what are the needs of the child in relation to their social care referral. So in terms of lot 1, we are talking about young people that may have some more complex needs and need some individual plans in more detail to support them, and that also they are less able or likely to be able to live with a larger group of other young people. So lot 2 is where the social care assessment is that young person has the skills and the resilience to live in a bigger group setting. But in relation to all the needs and the requirements of the setting for the young person, each individual placement, whether you're in lot 2, 1, 2, 3 or 4, they're all the interventions and the requirements are based on the young person's paperwork, their referral and their individual requirements.
If I could just come back on that. So I get what you're saying, but can you tell me, do we have any live-in support in any of these situations? Or is it just a question of the relevant professionals going in and meeting the young people, determining what they need and signposting them?
No, yeah. Some of the accommodations will have 24/7 live-in support. And what we're able to do is each provider offers a different type of service. So some will have that and some won't. So what we try to do best in commissioning is match the child with their individual needs, but also with the provider that can best support them. So there will be services where there is live-in support around the clock.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to go back to paragraph 1.8, where we're told for separated migrant children, the service has supported on average 4 to 6 young people per month. And I wanted to understand, did that mean recognise that this is a moving population? Some are joining the population of children being looked after, and some are leaving all the time, and this is just a snapshot, an average.
You're absolutely right. It's the only way we can kind of put factual data is a snapshot average and average it out in time. So each month there will be 46 on average, 46 young separated migrant children living in the service. Some will leave and some will join and some will continue through the month.
And thank you very much. And I appreciate that some of these are older young people, and so maybe moving on into some kind of supported living, or moving on. But are some of these children that are being adopted or fostered, or where are they going? If they're going out of the population, where would?
Yeah. So for supported accommodation, children that live in supported accommodation, I don't know the exact percentage, but I could find out for you, but I do know it's very high. The majority of them, the reason for their leaving is they're turning 18. Supported accommodation is the last step on a child's journey through the care system in terms of age, where if you are 16 or 17 and you're living in supported accommodation, it's very likely that will be your final child in care destination, and your next step will be into adulthood. And it, as I say, it has that level of independence because it is designed, and its purpose is to say to young people, you know, you need to start thinking about managing your budgets and getting yourself up on time to go wherever it is you need to go that day, be it college or work experience or work. Its focus is to develop those skills so that when children do turn 18 and they enter the adult world and the adult services, they have got the skills to be able to move on.
I might just come back with one more. Given that you say that the projected average time a young person has spent living in the supported accommodation service is 230 days per placement, do we understand that to mean that quite a large majority of the children coming into this are over 17? Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because it's, if you think about the cohort, is predominantly working with separated migrant children. So they are the majority of separated migrant children that enter the UK are between 16 and 17 years old. So they will be at a starting point between 16 and 17 years old. So that's that particular cohort. For if you are coming into care for the first time, age 16 or 17 years old, the likelihood is that you'll be offered a place in supported accommodation rather than a foster care home or a residential placement, because you're very close to adulthood and you are going to need to learn quite quickly the skills that you'll need when you get to adulthood around independence and managing your own budgets, your rent, your food, your getting to your job, your education, or whatever it is. So the sector as a whole generally is a first time entrance. There will be obviously young people that do enter into supported accommodation that have been in the care system for longer, and that's done in a planned way. And it could be that the child says, no, I want to go and live in supported accommodation because I want to learn those independent skills, or for another reason. But the reason it is that figure is that the majority of young people, for the reasons of separated migrant children or newly into care, will be entering supported accommodation as a care entrance for the first time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ambrose Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
The accommodation is across Cambridgeshire. Do you have any idea the numbers in the different districts? You've got 25 providers at the present moment, and how they're scattered around the Cambridgeshire. You can come back on that. So you can come back another time. Don't worry.
Okay, yeah, I can cut. We do, but we're expecting the cohort of providers that bid to be slightly different, because this was a previous joint agreement with Peterborough. So we're on our own in terms of this new framework. So we're expecting the dynamic of providers that are bidding to be slightly different, but I can absolutely come back to you on that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. I think that's everyone. Oh, sorry, Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to 4.3, the grant from central government to help support the cost of increased fees. Yeah. Do we have any sight of whether that's going to be enough money, or how long that money is going to last for before the council needs to find the funding to then support those ongoing extra fees?
So there are 4 payments that we are due. Oh, sorry, 3 more payments that we're due. We've already received 1 payment. So it's a payment. It was a payment in April 23. We should be having another payment this month, and then another in 24, and another in October 24. The amount that each local authority gets is determined using a calculation in relation to your child in care population and the number of children that you have age 17 living in your county. Is it going to be enough? we have some clear plans for how we want to use that money, and some of that will be going to support providers. The additional fees that are in relation to providers in terms of Ofsted registration they are additional fees for providers. You'd have to speak to a provider about whether they feel that fee is fair or proportional or large or small, because it does depend on the size of the provider, and there are ongoing registration costs on a yearly basis for each provider to continue their registration with Ofsted. It then depends on how each provider works with and implements the new inspection regime and requirements in terms of their staffing structures and so on and so forth. So I'd love to be able to give you a definitive answer to that question. I think there will be some providers where it's absolutely fine, and there will be others where there are challenges that we have to support them with.
Hi, it's a really good question. I think we would hope that the costs don't go too high, but obviously any extra burden on the provider, they are likely to pass on to us as the purchaser. So that will be no surprise. And that's what the grant is there for initially. Whether that will be enough in the long term, I doubt it, because it's a one-off over 4 payments, but it's not going to be recurring over future years. But the hope is that the work that Chris and his team does enough in the marketplace, if you like, to create more availability, so that the over time, as more homes open and register with Ofsted, that will, because there'll be more competition, that will bring the price down. And related to the earlier question about where they're going to be, we would hope for a really extensive span across the county, but that's probably going to be higher volume where property is cheaper. But it's also our hope to stimulate the market enough so that the residents are actually where we need them to be. So, you know, we need a mixed economy. But yeah, at the moment it's probably a bit of a hard to say, but you'd hope that over time competition would bring down the price, but I haven't always seen that.
But what I would say is that tendering now gives us a good advantage, because providers will be submitting their costs during the tender process, and we very clearly stated you need to forecast what your costs are going to be. So if we were not re-tendering, we would have unknowns of increases coming in relation to the inspection regime and the new regulations. Now that we're re-tendering, we can very clearly see where those costs are, and we'll be able to evaluate those in the tender process. And when we get to the conclusion of the process, we'll clearly be able to financially forecast, because we'll know what those costs are in relation to the providers and our budgets.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor Bradnam again, please.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from that question, in the narrative that Mr. Howard gave us, I may have misheard, but I heard you say something like that the grant was being given for children in care living in Cambridgeshire. And I'm mindful that 40% of our children in care do not live in Cambridgeshire. They are in placements outside the county. And so I just wanted to understand, is there a risk we might not get 40% of the grant?
No, it's the grant. The grant is calculated on the number of children that your local authority has responsibility for. It's irrelevant of where they live. We are responsible for X amount of children, therefore your grant is Y in relation to that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else. So if we move to the recommendations, co-opted member of the committee is eligible to vote on this item. We're being asked to note the retendering process for this contract and to delegate responsibility for awarding and executing a contract for the provision of supported accommodation services, pseudo-dynamic purchasing system, DPS, agreement for young people in care aged 16 and 17 years old, starting on the 1st of April 2024, and extension periods to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families. I think we're all in agreement, but does anyone dissent? No.
Agreed. Happy to take that.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. In which case we'll move to item 5. Item 5 is our finance monitoring report for August 2023, which seems like a long time ago. Martin Wade, our strategic finance business partner, is joining John, and they'll present this report. Thank you both.
Thank you, Chair. This report, as you say, is August, and obviously we're now in the middle of October, so it is slightly out of date, but just in terms of the update, just a few things I want to draw attention to. First, just a bit of the presentation in terms of the report. So the main Appendix 1 now has a slightly different presentation in terms of the numbers. So it shows both the gross and the income and then the net budget. We're hoping to refine the presentation of this over time, but it's hoped that it actually adds some further detail for the audience to be able to see the various makeup of the budgets within those particular areas. So obviously, if you do have any questions about that presentation, please ask. In terms of the overall position, to the end of August, the forecast outturn on the core funded activity has now increased to a forecast overspend of just under 8.3 million. The majority of that overspend is in relation to children and care placements, so links back into the previous item and the conversations around the need in that particular area. In terms of dedicated schools grant, we're still reporting an in-year position of around 4.4 million overspent, which aligns with our original safety valve submission at the time, and obviously we're ongoing work, as John will speak about later, in terms of the work we're doing around safety valve and refining those forecasts going forward. So nothing more I want to say. Obviously you've got the detailed report, so if there are any questions, happy to take them now.
Thank you. If I may start, can I ask the implications of the recent DfE corrections to next year's school funding and the implication that will have to our schools across the county?
Thanks, Chair. For members not aware, the DfE have recently republished our schools budgets. We received them at the end of July. There were an error in the national pupil calculations, so they've been restated. At a national level, this has meant that as a result of there being more pupils than originally forecast, a 0.8% reduction on the overall level of funding that is available. For Cambridgeshire, that meant that we went from a budget of 477 million down to 473, so a reduction of just over £4 million. Obviously the implication is that with the pay award and the other challenges that we're facing, that's quite a significant implication. We are working through at the moment the schools budgets. We'll be bringing them to you for consideration in January for final consideration. We'll try to bring a draft to you in November. Per pupil wise, we continue to be one of the lowest funded in the country. We remain 136th out of 149 local authorities for our level of funding. And we're only £130 per pupil above the lowest funded local authority in the country. So it's going to be very challenging, and obviously we're disappointed with the national picture, but we'll have to deal with that, and we will obviously advise you on that as we progress the budget setting process.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton, please.
I have two questions. Would you like me to take them together? Yeah, okay, thanks. The first one is a very general one, and for Martin. You mentioned the overspend on the children in care. What can we do about that? We have to look after children in care. What can we do?
Okay, so the service are doing some really good work at the moment, looking at step down options and cheaper provision for some of those children. As you say, we have no option but to provide support for those children in care. But it's looking, as we spoke about in the previous item, about the market, working with the market and actually reducing some of those really, really high cost placements. The majority of the overspend we have at the moment is actually due to a very, very small number of exceptionally high cost placements. And the work is around those to try and provide the care that they require, but at a much lower unit cost going forward.
Okay, so this is actually ongoing work, isn't it? It's for those particular. Yeah, thank you, thank you. And my second question is actually very specific. And the bottom of page 49, the integrated front door. If you could just unpack those 2 or 3 paragraphs, please. It's very contorted, and just explain quite simply what is going on there. That would be helpful. Thank you.
I think I'll pass this one to Martin.
So the integrated front door is our is the overall name for our contact center, our multi-agency safeguarding hub, and our early help hub. So they are all combined to create our integrated front door, but they all have their own separate functions within that. So that's the definitions.
From what I understand from reading this, and I've read it 3 times, I think it's just that the whole thing is quite concertinaed. There has been a change recently, and I think that's because we've separated out a service, but I just wanted to be clear about what was going on there, because there's a figure given as well. Thanks.
So what's been happening is we haven't separated yet. There has been an agreement between Peterborough and Cambridgeshire to separate our integrated front door, or our MASH, most specifically. What the work's been going on has been looking at the process that we follow when children someone has a concern about a child. What happens with that information as it comes into our front door? And the process mapping we did found that there was quite a complex process that pieces of information about children follow, which meant that we can sometimes have quite a slow response, or slower than we'd like. So the process mapping that we've done has identified a much better system or better process, taking out large chunks of that, so that if someone has a concern about a child, it gets from gets to the contact center and to the MASH in a much quicker time, which means that we can start assessing that children's needs and getting them support in a much quicker way. So that's what that means. That review, that's what that means. And it's hoped that through doing that, we will be able to make better decisions and make sure that we can divert children away from coming into statutory services at an earlier stage, because we're managing that process in a much more efficient way.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question really, and one comment. I welcome showing the gross situation, income and expenditure. I think that does add some more detail to it. But my question is around, and it's page 37 of the pack, or 41 if you look at it on the computer as I am, and it's around children in, I think it's bullet point 1.3, under children and safeguarding. It mentions agency staffing, and I remember looking back through my notes last year, I think we were running at a 40% vacancy level. I just wonder if that is still the similar one, and obviously I know it may be a difficult market, how we're doing in trying to obviously get more permanent staff rather than using agency. Thank you.
Yeah, I can pick that up. We're working really hard on that, and we've improved the picture from last year. So I asked for that figure at the beginning of September, and it was down from 40 to 30%. So that's a 10% shift in the right direction, which is good for us. Having more permanent staff means better outcomes for children, because it brings a lot of stability to us as an organisation, and it means that children don't have to change social workers so frequently. There's also a lot of recruitment going at non-social worker level, at a management and leadership level. And for example, we'll have an entirely permanent leadership team by December this year, which will also be a really good springboard for us to move on from, because we know that people like to go to work for permanent jobs where there is a permanent leadership and management structure. We know it's much easier to recruit. So those two things are both moving in the right direction. It's taking a little bit of time, but it's better than it was last year, which is a good sign. Gosh, yeah, and I forgot the opportunity to mention our academy. So our social work academy is being launched in November the 20th, and that relates to the earlier question about how many people that will be supporting from last time. So we know that we're going to have an increased number of social work apprentices, going from 5 to 10, I think, this year, due to additional funding that we were successful in from the Department of Education. And we will be growing our cohort of newly qualified social workers year on year, going up to 20 newly qualified as soon as possible. And they will also be supporting the Academy will also be supporting our international social workers who will be arriving in the early part of next year as well. So by this time next year, we will have had quite a few graduates from our Academy. We will have a number of new apprentices, and we will have all of our international social workers here. So we'll have even greater stability in our workforce.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, in which case we are asked to note the reports, which we have done. Thank you for joining us. Item 6. Item 6 is an update on the early years funded entitlement and wraparound expansion. And Jonathan Lewis is again joining us to introduce this report along with Carly. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really important report for you to engage with. It's not full of answers around early years and the changes that are coming through, but I think this is going to be part of a series of reports we bring you about how the local authority responds to the Chancellor's announcement around investment in early years, with a focus on growing the economy, but equally making a greater offer for childcare and education for those children up to the starting from the age of 9 months. I think the challenge we face is at the current time, there is high aspirations around a rollout of a programme. Section 2.2 of the report outlines from a perspective of the childcare aspect, a significant change that we will have to deliver in 3 years' time around a phased rollout to every child aged 9 months to 3 years, access to free childcare. That is a huge change in the amounts of children, the types of education provision and providers that we'll need in the market, and a huge demand on a system that is already under pressure due to challenges such as sufficiency, sustainability and funding. And we as a local authority are going to have to develop the provision out there to meet this government aspiration around needs. There is more funding coming. We don't know what that funding is yet. That funding certainly has impacted short term. In the report, we outlined the increase in hourly rates that's been made available to our settings. We hope there is further investment that will go into the sector around hourly rates, but also investing in developing provision. And that's going to be one of the challenges going forward. So we will be back to committee to share the government's investment and to get your views on how best to deliver in this market. And I think it's really important to remember this is led by the private, voluntary and independent sector, who we will have to work very closely with to support them with developing this government proposal. It's also important to note that the government also has aspirations around developing wraparound childcare provision for those children in primary schools, making sure that every child up to the age of 11 can access their entitlement for wraparound between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Every single day of the week. And again, this is going to be a huge challenge because the government are providing funding for starting up this provision, but will not be supporting the cost of the provision, unlike the childcare provision for younger children. We are in a advantageous position. We have bid to be one of the trailblazers in this area, so we are quite closely working with the government on their policy and objectives. We are very clear, particularly for wraparound, the need to support those children on pupil premium with the cost. Those children with SEND will need additional support. And we are also keen to support parents who are returning to work for the first time through offering wraparound within the primary sector. The report concludes by focusing on the market, and this is a sector-led approach to this, and 2.1 of the 2.10 of the report onwards outlines this. We've worked really hard to sustain the sustainability of this sector, but we are seeing closures from early years providers despite this positive news about growth. That's a challenge of levels of funding. It's a challenge of availability of workforce. And it's one that we're going to need to grapple with to make sure that we can continue to grow this sector and meet that government objective. And the sufficiency duty will fall on the local authority to support. We're also really keen to help develop our workforce. We know that supporting childcare for a child aged 9 months is very different to a 4-year-old. We have a series of training going on. We're very fortunate to provide a lot of the training ourselves in-house. We also know that there will be more SENS challenges that will be within that cohort, and we need to make sure we are ready to meet those needs and move forward. So we've given you the position in the paper. We still have a lot of questions unanswered, particularly around funding, and obviously we'll be back to committee in the new year with some updates on how we roll this out across the county. But very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Atkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if you could perhaps say, you mentioned there have been closures recently. I wonder if you could flesh out that part of your report a little further and give the committee a sense of the very kind of short-term immediate picture, if possible.
The challenges come in 2 key areas. The first being workforce. This is in some aspects a minimum wage role in childcare. And it's very difficult to recruit, particularly in those areas where there's high cost of living and challenges with things such as the rental market and people being able to live in a local area. So we've had challenges where provision has closed because there simply hasn't been the expertise and the bodies to be able to run that provision. The other aspect is around funding. The funding is very low. I think if you look at the hourly rates that are in the table, if you think about, there is a ratio, there's a requirement for a certain amount of children per adults. And the fact that this is run by the private sector in most senses. Yes, we have voluntary independent, we have charity provision in there, but it's also run by business. And actually the funding is not sufficient. I think the government have recognised that with quite a large uplift in funding coming through. But as we see things like the minimum wage increase, as we see cost of living rise, the ability to be able to afford appropriately trained staff is causing more of a challenge. So we've seen issues around both those groups within Cambridgeshire, and it's one that we're keeping a watch and brief on. But there is relatively little we can do apart from encouraging growth, looking at sufficiency, making sure provision is adequately filled, and is there and ready to be grown now for the new challenges we get with increased entitlement.
Thank you. And I'll take this moment to place on record our thanks to those who've stepped in, particularly at the last minute where we've had contracts handed back to ensure that care and wraparound care has been available. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you, Chair. And my question is related to that of Councillor Atkins. We know that already providers have been closing and finding themselves unable to afford to deliver the provision. So how sure are you that we have sufficient provision available to us to deliver? I understand the drift of this, the gist of this paper is that we can't be sure, but can you give us some sort of thought about that, please?
I think this is where the development of guidance, policy and funding will steer us. Our role, as we've shared in this committee many times, is to ensure sufficiency. We're not the provider. We're not. It's not like the school system where we have that duty about physical delivery. We have one of sufficiency. So you'll read in the report that we've already been out and spoken to providers. You can see there are some bottlenecks in terms of growth and how big people can get, the size of premises, the staffing. Our role is to, I think, to focus in on what are these barriers to growth. How can we grow the provision we've got? What's got to be different about it? How do we work with, things like new developments? How can we work with planners and others around using available provision spaces to grow to meet that need? I think what we need to do now is get real clarity on demand. I think that's going to be an issue. This is not a compulsory education. Remember, compulsory school age doesn't start until the term after they're 5. And it's very difficult to judge how many children will want to access this provision. We've done some analysis already. We think the demand is going to be higher than the government's expectation. So we are focused in on now growing that area, looking at the workforce. So I've mentioned we're providing training to try and grow the workforce there and find a critical path we can get down to meet this need. It's not going to be easy. We have difficulties delivering childcare at the moment in certain aspects of the county. What we're hoping is some investment and hopefully some guidance, clear guidance might help us to grow this going forward. But that's where I think the committee need to be aware this is a challenge, and we'll be bringing back some of the developments, things that we want to do to try and meet this objective.
So what I'm wondering is, I'm just trying to be constructive here. Are we feeding in to district council planning authorities to talk about allowing the provision of houses that are big enough to accommodate such a live at home business, but also are we, as the provider of newly built schools, are we providing sufficient space for the wraparound care that is often quite conveniently delivered at the school that the children will eventually go to as their primary school? I'm just wondering if we can do two-pronged effort towards that. Thank you.
Yes, we're working very closely with our district colleagues. You'll be aware of the recent motion that went through full council that made that recommendation around use of accommodation, particularly for childminding, which is a key part of this sector too, alongside nursery, preschools, other providers going forward. And obviously looking at particularly around community assets, where there are community centres and other provisions such that, how can they support this issue? In terms of our ability to influence around schools, every school that we now build has early years provision as part of it. That's a policy decision this committee made some time ago. Obviously, the delivery of wraparound is outside of the core school hours, so there is space by the very nature of not every child is remaining in school. Our challenge in the school sector will more be about, can they make it affordable, deliver it within existing resources? It's not something they can easily subsidise from their main school budgets. So we will continue that dialogue that we've had. And again, the Joint Administration brought forward the proposal around breakfast clubs that we did a pack for. We've shared with you the information on that to try and help grow that sector and sustain it. I think that's going to be a challenge. I think it's a tough call for schools, but one they will want to deliver. But we're going to have critical mass around numbers and areas such as that. And just to say, much of our wraparound happens off-site too. So it's facilitating the market to meet the needs if there is not an immediate provision locally.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton, please.
Thank you. I've got two questions, so I'll bring them both together. One is, I think you've touched on this, John, and that's to do with the, you're not sure about the funding yet. I'm concerned about the knock-on effect that this will have on buildings. So whether it be school buildings or whether it be buildings of private providers, because obviously if you're having a breakfast clubs and evening clubs, then when are the buildings going to be cleaned? There's a maintenance issue. There's a long-term maintenance issue. How is that going to be picked up? Do you have any indication of that in the funding? And my second question is about the voluntary sector. Have you any idea what role the voluntary sector might play in the provision of these clubs, etc.?
So in terms of the buildings, it will significantly place a pressure upon that. And, we have the full range of use in this sector too. So we have a lot of early years providers that pack away their equipment. I went and visited one many years ago where it went into the back of somebody's car at the end of the day and lived in their car in their garage and came back on the next day and was unpacked and reworked. So the logistics of delivery are going to be key. The wear and tear, the provision, the suitability of space is something we're going to need to consider. If we look at the childcare arrangements, a 9-month-old needs a very different environment to a 4-year-old. So we are going to have to think, and this is where we hope there will be investment coming through from the government, capital grants, other support, so we can do adaptations, variations and modernisation of some of our buildings to support that going forward, because it would be a critical part of delivery. And obviously we want to sustain the providers we've got, so that's important that we do that. In terms of the voluntary sector, if we didn't have the voluntary sector, we wouldn't meet any of our sufficiency requirements. So they are critical in this role. I think one of the things we may need to do is reach out in a wider area. You know, it's a good business model actually for lots of voluntary organisations to support their core objectives through, you know, developing childcare and provision. And often they have access to the right sort of skills, they have access to the right sort of accommodation that we could grow that provision in. So the voluntary sector certainly will not be forgotten, and they are a key partner in delivering to this. So that will form part of the plan as we go forward. Obviously, it's going to be based on geography and who's in that area, but we're very keen to work with all interested bodies to grow this partnership around childcare and early years provision.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick comment, really, and a bit of a question. I mean, the wraparound care, certainly the primary school I'm a governor of has just started it back in September, because certainly being used when you're competing, for want of a better word, against other schools who provide it. Parents who've got busy lives and jobs want that sort of flexibility that there, and it is a good selling point. Just interestingly, certainly that particular governing body's assessment is very much that it's got to stand on its own 2 feet. We haven't got the money within the school budget to fund it. So certainly my understanding is that you know, if it doesn't sort of justify the expenditure, then it is something that we couldn't carry on with.
I agree. It's going to be a significant challenge. You know, we have a lot of small schools. We're bringing our small school strategy back to the next meeting. There is a critical mass. You do need a certain amount of children. You do need, you know, certain adults that can do that. The workforce to get people to come in for a slot at the start of the day and the end of the day is limited. So, and, you know, quite rightly, we cannot subsidise this. We can. There is the element that you can support children through it. That's where we've been making the case, particularly around those on low income, to get more support, because that would sustain and bring numbers in, encourage people back into work. But equally, you know, supporting children with SEN, it should be open access to all. But that can mean you need additional adults, and we don't have necessarily the vehicle at the moment through our funding arrangements to support that. So it's going to come down to finance, but equally we need to be celebrating the benefits of a wraparound provision. You know, educational outcomes are strong, and it gives children that chance of socialisation with different children too. So, you know, we've got to get into that balance mode, but I'll certainly be talking to head teachers and governors in the coming months to make sure that we're clear and we can try and deliver whatever we can. But again, recognising that other parts of the sector can support with these needs too, and very successfully so.
Thank you. Councillor Slatter, please.
Thank you, Chair. My concerns are around 2.1.1 and the Byzantine complications of parental choice in where they want to use their entitlement. I've looked it up in the website now, so I saved asking you the first question, which is there is 30 hours of free childcare per week for 38 weeks. That's during school term time. Or it says in our website, you may be able to get the free childcare for 52 weeks if you use fewer than 30 hours per week. Check with your childcare provider to find out if that's something they offer. That sounds so difficult to me and so unpredictable for a business model. Because, you know, when are the family circumstances going to change? So they just want term time, or no, they want some during the holidays. They've been offered something different in the way of work. And of course, the driver of this from the central government's point of view is getting people back to work. And we have to be able to demonstrate that we're enabling that to happen. So it is really complicated. One question where maybe one part of the council can help another part is in terms of the business planning. I mean, the algorithms need to get to work on that sort of thing, presumably, to see if the books do balance. If you let some people have it all the year round, but you do need them to be a sufficient number to be doing that, to invest in the right sort of accommodation. I know we do have the business, what's it called? The Business and IP Centre in our libraries, for example. And although those are more for small entrepreneurial startups, I suspect that some of the nuts and bolts of business planning could be helped by that. And I do wonder whether, if not through the library system that's there already, whether within the education department there is any capacity for that sort of business advice, because that presumably could make a big difference to the small companies, or, you know, even just individuals starting up.
I acknowledge your first point around flexibility. We are one of the local authorities that were early in introducing the ability to stretch your entitlement across the year, as opposed to being fixed within the school term. And it is going to be a critical part of success. That's why we're interested to see the guidance on how best it's going to be delivered. But it will obviously be wrapped up into what providers can meet and what their obligations are. We have a lot of early years provision that is tied to the school term. Because it's run by volunteers, parents, it sits around that arrangement. So we're always going to have an element of fixed and obviously an element of flexibility. In terms of your business planning cycle, just to reassure you, we have a fantastic team within our early years offer that deliver financial sustainability support. We look at you know, how they're operated, finances, income. We can provide advice and guidance and models of governance that support those. So that's already in place. Whether it's sufficient as we grow, that's the challenge that we need to understand the funding, how much the local authority will get to roll this out, because clearly that business viability and growth model is going to be a key part of persuading and encouraging people to grow, because we will need more places from, you know, existing and new providers too.
Well, may I follow up on that? I mean, what would be the way in to get that advice, as far as, you know, you as a department providing it?
I believe it's available on our website. I think under the I forgot the name of the website now.
Yes, the website talks from the point of view of, say, the parents coming in and looking at it. I'm just wondering if there's
I think we've got the provider details, and I'm very happy we'll dig out the link and we'll send it around to the committee.
Useful, you know, just to be able to say there is a team and this is how you get hold of them. It might be worth looking into.
We want
to encourage as many as possible to try it.
We'll make sure it's clear and pick that up, but we'll be out there.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you. Just as others were speaking, it occurred to me that this has to, as somebody said, this is tied up with the government wanting to get more people back into work. And I'm just wondering how much this meshes with the fact that a lot of adults choose to work less than 30 hours a week, which means they continue to receive housing benefit, I believe. And so I just wonder, will the benefits of the childcare outweigh the lost housing benefit cost? And am I right in thinking that this is what this initiative is trying to resolve?
I can't comment on housing benefit, it's not my area of expertise, but obviously the policy is driven to get people back into work. There's obviously critical thresholds in terms of universal credit and thresholds. I think the reason they've gone up to 30 hours from such an early age is to make sure people have sufficient hours on the minimum wage to get above those thresholds. So the cost and payback is outweighed by the policy objective. So very happy to go away and see if we can pull off some information about what it means for different groups on different incomes. But I think the whole policy drive is, if we can make a full offer, people move away from benefits and move into the employment status and don't need them going forward. So I think that has been calculated as part of the offer, I believe, through that route.
I'm reassured that you believe that that's why it's being done, and I personally would welcome that information, because I think that threshold is a real barrier to people not going back into longer hours of work. And then the children thing, having children to look after too, plays into that. So yes, I'd be interested in that. Thank you.
Just to stress, though, this is a universal offer that's being made here. This is not tied to employment. It's there designed to encourage employment. So there is no link, just to make clear to the committee, that's not the policy. It's a universal offer for those by 2025.
Thank you. I appreciate this is a lot of what ifs and dependent on funding going forward, but it's good to have gotten ahead of the curve on this one and all of the work that this has entitled. We've been asked to note and comment on this report, which I think we've done fully. Oh, sorry, Andrew.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add something very quickly because it ties with the other items, particularly the ones we've already discussed. First of all, it seems to me that the having already received the benefits of this, the team have been very proactive in getting involved in this area, and it's hugely complex. So I just want to pay a compliment to them. But it's just seemed to me that we've got a problem as a board in the context of, or as a committee, in the context of how we're going to take these areas forward in terms of risk management. Because I don't think we're debating, are we, how admirable the aspiration is or what the potential positive effects are. But we are hearing that there is enormous capacity and resourcing challenges ahead. I just wonder whether it would be correct to assume that this is going to pan out consequently, particularly as it's a universal offer, in not being something that works at scale. And therefore, are we also correct in saying that, again, we're going to have regional variations in access and quality? And I wonder if that might form the basis of which we might have some future reports, so we can really understand as it unfolds where this is working and where it isn't working, so that we avoid the normalised patterns we have across Cambridgeshire for understandable reasons as to where those less advantaged can get left behind.
Agreed. And I think having not had the finances yet, I think the only mitigation offered has been the change to the ratios, which I think the sector has been very firm in their rejection of. But yeah, I think John would agree. This is what we're looking towards.
Yeah, I think what's the really important thing to bring to you is the sufficiency aspect to it, where geographically can we deliver, why we can't deliver in those areas. I think it's one of those areas that because we have to do it through engagement, it's going to be slower. And you're quite right. You know, we can probably predict where we're going to have challenges delivering, and we need to probably target and prioritize those. So be very happy to bring back a monitoring report that picks up that sufficiency geography and geography as part of it, because I think it's going to be really key to focus our efforts on the inequalities that we already have in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is everyone. So we've been asked to note and comment on this report, which we have done. Thank you very much. The next item is item 7. Item 7 is our Special Educational Needs Service and Safety Valve Programme updates. First, John, you're going to introduce this one for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. In this report, I've tried to bring together 3 aspects of the work we're doing around SEND. That around the current position with demand on our services, the implications that has, the impact and growth in numbers, and the challenges that we are faced with delivering on our statutory duties in relation to this. The second part is around the safety valve process. We've obviously briefed committee previously about working with the DFE to create a sustainable budget and spend for our provision for SEND based upon our transformation programme. And, you know, within the report, we've given you a section in there about our priorities, our focus on early intervention, prevention, sharing best practice, targeting support of those children that need it, and delivering on capacity challenges that we have across the county. The final section of the report is on national policy changes. We know many of the challenges we face in Cambridgeshire are replicated nationally. The government published its SEND and AP improvement plan recently, and I've tried to give you an overview of progress. It is slow nationally. I think it's a good way of describing it. We've done some work locally based upon what we know and how it can work, but to give you a feeling and flavour of the government's progress and focus in these areas. You know, I'd end by making a comment around, you know, the complexity in this area continues to be challenging. We're getting a higher level of needs. We're seeing more challenges come from mental health and autism, particularly in the growth of the numbers we're seeing. but the challenges of COVID, school anxiety are manifesting themselves throughout the system. And what we've tried to do in the report is show how we're addressing those needs in a challenging context and deliver on our aspirations for good outcomes for children with SEND. So I'll pause there and I'll pick up any questions after the speaker. Thanks.
Thank you. We have one public question on this report, Mrs. Liz Day, who is here in person with us. Thank you. I'll let you get settled. You have up to 3 minutes to present your question, and we operate a traffic light system. I think Michelle's going to explain to you the microphone and that kind of thing. So whenever you're ready.
Just talking to her when you're ready. Can you hear me? Okay, let's bear with me. Never done this before. I'm just going to read out the thing. So the information within the report is aspirational in wording towards improving SEND support as early as possible in the educational journey of children and young people with special educational needs and disability. I'm totally in support of that sentiment. I do hold concerns that there is zero mention of statutory requirements under the Children's and Families Act, that the local authority holds significant responsibility and therefore outcomes, including key performance indicators towards achievement. The report updates an implementation of work streams agreed as part of the safety valve deal shows a strong bias towards monitoring of financial sustainability as detailed within the Local Government Act. I totally agree that financial sustainability is essential and important to well-managed local government and education for children and young people in the local area. It is a huge concern to me that there are priorities within the conflict between these two statutory acts, and the Department for Education has pushed pressure onto the local authority to accept the safety valve deal as a way to resolve an increase in deficit budget of the designated schools grant found in the high needs block fund. The only budget that seemingly has been allowed to accrue an accumulated deficit over time. The fact there has been an accumulated deficit during several years and since the inception of the Children and Families Act would suggest there has significantly been insufficient funding provided to the local authority to adequately fund demand for support by a demographic that is protected, that has protected characteristics under the Equality Act. That really is poor management of resources, and intentionally underfunding causes ongoing detriment and harm to many thousands of children and young people. The report suggests that increase in demand has been largely due to schools pushing for education, health and care assessments with a view of securing a legal document known as the Education, Health and Care Plan that details specific needs and how to meet those needs in a suitable and accessible way, to game the system to secure more funding. There is not statistical data included that shows that premise to be true or otherwise. As a peer supporter to many families of children and young people within the local area and beyond, and from feedback within my networks, I can confidently state that no parent carers support schools to make spurious formal requests for EHC assessments to secure additional funding for educational settings. All parent carers will be focused on securing an accessible and suitable education that meets their child's needs adequately. As it states within the law, within the Children's and Families Act, schools often appear ill-equipped to attend to their part of the process. Examples are available upon request if you so want them. My question is, how are the local authority going to meet its statutory requirements under the detail that is detailed within the Children's and Families Act?
Thank you, Mrs. Day. I can open this to the committee for questions of clarification only, if anyone has any for Mrs. Day. No. Due to, obviously, there's a lot there and a lot of complexity, so we will provide you with a written answer within 10 working days of this meeting, which will be appended to the minutes and sent round to members as well. But we thank you for coming to us today. Thank you. So back to the report, with that in mind, do we have any comments or questions, please, committee? Send and safety valve. No, I guess I would comment on the recent changes, or not changes, the recent beginning of the new schools and opening the formal process for those. And if you could just update us on the progress of those, please, John.
Yeah, we're really delighted that in the summer holidays, the Secretary of State announced a new free school, special school for March. 210 places, an area of special schools, so meeting all needs in that community. They've also announced the opening of a social and emotional mental health special school at Gamlingay that will support young people from age 11 to 16. And we are working closely with the DFE on finding a suitable sponsor to run these schools. The Gamlingay school we will look to open from 2025, and the March free school from 2026. So significant capital investment from government. There's over £50 million coming to the county. Obviously, we are supplementing that with growth of our own special school provision. We're really pleased to do the topping out ceremony recently for the new Presley Wood special school here in Alconbury that will create additional places in the Huntingdonshire area. And obviously we're busy working on expansions at Martin Bacon Academy, at Swavesey, and also Samuel Pepys in St Neots. So really positive move forward. It's one of the biggest challenges we faced is growth and meeting parental need and demand for specialist provision. And we're making good progress on delivering those places.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up what you just said, John. Does that obviously with the new school at March and Gamlingay, does that obviously we as a county fund those on a revenue basis, but does that mean because we've got a specialist school, then obviously the cost proportionally are much less than doing the current system, that so we've then got more money available or less drag on the HCP children, who are being provided for as they are at the moment?
The risk around not having sufficient specialist places means that children may have to be placed some distance from home. They may be placed in an independent special school, which can cost 3 to 4 times the cost of a mainstream special school place. And actually what we want to do is keep children locally to support them in their communities so they can successfully transition to college, into employment, into community provision at the end of that time. So the rationale around the new provision was agreed with the DFE. It's part of our modelling of places over time, looking at our growth in numbers and sustaining our budgets through having that local provision that's better value for money, but better for children too. So absolutely, we'll meet that objective. And it's all part of agreed process around how we look at our growth in numbers and meet that growth.
They come back very quickly on that, Chair. So from the location of those two schools that you've looked at, not where, that they reducing the travelling for a lot of those pupils because they're relatively close to those two centres, which obviously is, nobody wants children being taxied for an hour each way to school. Obviously, that's not sensible.
We have looked at geography for where they need to be. So South Fenland, for instance, didn't have a special school in the locality. So that was a very obvious area to work on. We're very aware that children are travelling across the county to access. One of the things that we did over the summer is contact parents and made the offer to, do you want to reconsider which special school you go to and look at, a different provision elsewhere? And we had some positive feedback from parents. We're not going to insist on children moving school. That's not appropriate. We'd obviously discuss that at the appropriate point of transition. to make that work. But ultimately, we want to try and reduce the distance that are travelled. We want to keep children locally, but we have to meet needs. So that's the key consideration. And obviously, we have different types of special schools that meet different needs. So it's not a case of the local one. It is the place, the fit, the capacity to meet those needs. And we're working really hard on, getting our capacity right for children locally. So there'll be more work going on, and obviously we would want to work with parents and our parent carer forum to think about the best way of releasing these places and making sure the right children are accessing.
Thank you. Councillor Slatter, please.
Yes, following on from the very fair question that was put to us earlier, I was fairly desolate to discover that the funding from central government there's such a time lag between identifying the need and any money coming down to help us to cope with that need. And clearly the safety valve arrangements, in their emphasis of the universal, a universal offer, the OA or the OAP, and making sure that the children are helped very early on, problems are identified. I am concerned that we need to be sure that every school has a SENCO, and a SENCO that is confident in their own skills and training and backup from elsewhere, whether it's within an academy trust or with the local authority. And I would like to be sure that we monitor and are aware of when there's a gap, because that makes a big difference to a child's life for a year or two. They're absolutely crucial in their cognitive development. And we do hear this, of course, as caseworkers, counsellors, when people say, oh, so-and-so schools, the SENCO's moved, she was really good, what's going to happen now? There's almost a panic with some parents who know that their children are going to need that extra support. And when we know we're already in deficit, it's really important we make the most of this safety valve impetus to make the point that it needs to be mainstream school provision above all, and not, but the special school will have a place to part to play, and it's getting that help to teachers. Thank you.
I agree with your comments and sentiments there. The role of SENCO is critical. We have a team whose role is to support and develop that group. One of the findings of the national AP and SEND review is a new national qualification for SENCOs, which will help deliver, hopefully, succession planning as much as it will the quality of people and what they do. One of the recent changes we're just in the process of making is that we are aligning the work of the SENCO oversight team with school improvement to make sure that when we are in schools, when we are looking at outcomes, SEND is equally as important in that group, to make sure that the provision, the quality of teaching is supporting good outcomes and continues to work collectively as part of those teams. So we're placing a real focus in on particularly supporting SEND support, so children below the level of EHCPs, because they're not always as visible as a group. Our ordinarily available toolkit, which I can never say, is proving to be starting to raise the aspiration and bar on where schools should be. We have inequalities across the county on that caliber and quality of delivering for SEND. What we tend to find is a patchy picture. They'd be very good at delivering one type of need, but not another. We need consistency. Certainly the government green paper is really clear that there is an expectation of where SEND is supported at, and to that level. We hopefully are slightly ahead of that curve by developing the training, support, the provision, the resources teachers need, and checking it's being put in place. So I think it's a key focus. We are an incredibly inclusive county. If you look at our amount of children with EHCPs in mainstream, it's much higher than other places. And I think that reflects the fact inclusion is key, but there's more work to be done. And that's going to be a real focus for us coming into the next year.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton, please.
2 points. I'm partly taking up Councillor Slatter's question. I'm really pleased to see the local working with schools. What effect is that having on your own team, John? And does your own team need to be strengthened? Does your own team need more resources to do all the additional work that the safety valve is involving. That's one important point. Well, to me, that's important. And the second thing is just a comment. I'm pleased to see the terms of reference for the executive board and to see the wide range of wide range of members? Partners. Thank you. Partners involved. Thank you.
In terms of resources, have been very well supported actually corporately. There has been a recognition that we need to invest to create capacity and give ourselves more resources. And we're at the moment creating some more roles to put a real focus and emphasis on our transformation programme. What I highlight in the report is some of the challenges of growth and need and demand coming through. So particularly education psychologists, our casework officers, and working with some of our specialist teachers, we know the needs are rising. We need more capacity. We are, again, working very closely with the Section 151 officer and have requested more resources that have been supported. But if our growth continues, we will need to continue to increase that, because to run the statutory process, to be compliant with our statutory duties, doing an annual review, assessing on timescale, some of the matrix that you've seen in other reports, we will start to see a decline in those measures without additional resources. But again, I've been very well supported, and I'm not afraid to go and ask for more. So we continue to do that. Your point on partners is all important. It's often seen that education is the sole lead for SEND. It's not. It's all partners, and you know, the way we've developed the executive board is to place that focus and emphasis and challenge on all areas. So that's a real key development. That's what Ofsted will expect to see when they come and look at the local area. And we know that actually partnership between social care, health, and all the other partners are really key for us. So it's been a step forward, and hopefully we'll see some good outcomes coming from that group.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the point that you made earlier on about delivery of special schools in geography, and you mentioned some, but you didn't mention Waterbeach Newtown, and I just wanted to check whether you can reassure me of the time frame for delivery of the special school at Waterbeach Newtown.
We don't have a special school plan for Waterbeach at the current time. What we will be looking at doing is delivering some support through the new build of the primary school and creating provision there. But the current time it's not planned for a special school. Look around and say, just check that.
Wasn't that in the original plan?
No,
I thought?
No, it wasn't.
I knew that there was a primary school, but I thought
primary school and secondary school, but no special school. Obviously, we will monitor that over time and look at those areas. We are obviously Northstowe has a special school, so which is geographically fairly close. We're expanding that provision, but we don't have plans at the moment for Waterbeach to have a special school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Canon Reid, please.
Thank you. Again, just wanted to compliment the team because it's such a complex area, and my experience has been that there's been a very open, safe space made for the consultation on all of this, and that's to be appreciated. My question, though, comes back to the graph that was linked into Martin's section, which is on page 43 of the pack, which just shows a very steady line, as just been described, between 2018 and 2023 of EHCP numbers and percentages. And this, given the steadiness of that rise, not even you can't even see a blip for COVID, probably one of the few things where COVID doesn't seem to have had an effect on a graph. I mean, there's no reason to think it won't be double in 6 years' time. Is there any reason to think that the HCP numbers will stabilise off? Because if they don't, then it's quite clear that the provision that we're currently making, brilliant though that it is only chasing the curve of places and provision, which is going to be another sufficiency risk, isn't it?
Absolutely. When do we plateau? Because you can't have 100% of children with SEND in a school. And what's that model looking like? It's one of the factors that we've considered as part of the safety valve model. You know, what we have seen, if we gave you a graph of individual need, it's much flatter for certain areas of need. So physical disability, moderate learning difficulties, much more level approach. The growth, as I described it, is through social, emotional, mental health needs and through autism. They are our key growth areas. And, you know, that probably represents better diagnostic. It's probably identifying needs earlier. And, you know, that clear understanding of those needs, which we didn't have previously. So, yeah, when does it flatten? We don't know. All we can do is respond to the demand, plan for it, try and keep ahead of that curve. Ultimately, though, you know, it's going to reach a point where that financial imperative around it becomes critical. All I would reassure you is that chart you're seeing in the report is very similar to most other local authorities. In some ways, actually, our growth has slowed compared to other places. So maybe we've been slightly earlier in that growth compared to others. You know, we do a lot of work around assessment, early identification, and our assessment in terms of an EHCP assessment is at the Childcare and Families Act position, not the SEND Code of Practice. So we are more accommodating of meeting needs early.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Anna and then Councillor Slatter, please.
Thank you very much. Sorry, that triggered something I intended to ask before, and that is on the chart of educational health and care plans. It might be useful to either, in addition, provide a chart as a percentage of, say, 1,000 head of population, because surely part of the increase is to do with the fact that we've just got a bigger population. Of course, you need to know how many we have in toto, but yeah, you know, it might be worth recognising that this is not just because we're getting a greater proportion. You know, it's not that as time goes on, more and more and more of our children need educational health and care plans. It's because our population's going up and the proportion of that stays the same. So, or does it? I'd just like to know what that's telling us.
I haven't got the figures to hand, but the proportion of children with SEND is growing greater than our proportion of children. Our number of children. So very happy to provide that information. It's part of it's normally in our management information pack that you do get, but we can give you that breakdown. Very happy to do that. I think we over doubled our proportion of children with education, health and care plan percentage wise. So that gives you an idea of, yes, our population's up, but equally bear in mind our population now coming into reception is declining again. So we've got a blip going through, yes, but the numbers continue to increase, not exponentially, but they are increasing in line with that. But we'll provide that. Very happy to do a note for you on that.
The sort of question I kind of want to ask more or less on Radio 4. Please, can you express it per head of population? Anyway, thank you very much, John.
Yes, it'd be quite good to have them get to work on these things. Yes, following closely on from that. And that is, I would like to get a feel for what proportion of the plans that are on our books now are almost static. I mean, there's so many families where there's a child who has been diagnosed with autism of some sort. Sometimes that just gives the child a degree of self-knowledge, the family guidance on how to avoid problems, and the school as a note on their papers. And it's not that dissimilar to my having been prescribed glasses. In childhood, I continue to wear them. They deal with the problem. If I didn't have them, I would have a very big problem. But as long as I can deal with it, it is manageable. Presumably, these plans have got the category that gives us an idea when it's just static, manageable. It's not a critical thing compared with the very complex needs that are always going to need almost increasing, different equipment, updating the equipment, etc.
So education, health and care plans are subject to an annual review. At that point, the needs of a child should be assessed, provision within a school reviewed or a setting reviewed, and changes happening. One of the work streams that we've got in our transformation program is around increasing independence. So part of that is to review that and say, well, what with that trajectory and pathway of that child beyond that annual review, where are they going? What do we need to do? What will their support be as they move into a different type of provision going forward? So we're very minded of the need. I think an EHCP should never be static across a child's education. It will vary in line with transitions. the needs, their personal development and their emotional and social development that sits within that. And that's obviously subject to that annual process. But we're obviously doing more work looking at groups within that to see what needs to be different. So a big focus post-19, how do we transition successfully into adulthood? Is the support more or less, or is it different going forward? So it's a real focus of what we're doing. So just to reassure you, they do get checked and looked at.
Sorry, it wasn't a matter of criticism about static. It's just a steady managed need, and it goes with that. Do they get cancelled, or do we just keep them on the books because that is part of that child's learning nature?
No, they all get reviewed, and if they're no longer needed, if the provision's not needed, we don't have them. It's not specified in an EHCP, and that we've put reference to that in the document. We do cease EHCPs. It's part of the statutory process, and that is followed where appropriate. And obviously, that's part of the subject to review by all stakeholders, including parents, children, and professionals.
Thank you, and I think. For those who don't know, a huge part of the EHCP process is hearing the child's voice and that of the parents as well. So it is an inclusive process within that. I think we need to note the updates provided on the Special Educational Needs Service, SEND transformation and safety valve agreement, which we have done, and there is no vote needed on this one. I'd like to thank our guest for coming today. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting or choose to leave if you wish. So moving on to item 8. Item 8 looks at the preparation for children's inspection readiness activity. And Martin Perbrick, our Executive Director for Children, Education and Families, will introduce this report. Martin, please.
Thank you. I'll assume you've all had a chance to look at it, but I'm just going to pick out some highlights. Children, education and families are fortunate enough to be highly regulated. We've got 3 different regulators, and the running order of events so far has been in our most recent ILACS inspection was 2019. That was completed by Ofsted, and that was a requires improvement. Oh, ILACS. Oh, inspection of local authority children's services. Thank you. Okay, and under the same framework, we've had 2 subsequent focused visits. So because we requires improvement, then we will have 2 pieces of inspection activity between our main inspections. We had one in 2020 looking at children in care, and another one in 2022 looking at children subject to child protection plans. So that's the ILACS framework. That's where we are. We have our SEND inspections, which is an inspection completed by Ofsted and CQC, Care Quality Commission. You probably all knew that one. The last inspection there was 2017. And finally, we have our Youth Offending Services inspection, which is undertaken by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation. And the most recent inspection under that framework was August this year. It's as yet unpublished, but it will be published soon, and we'll share it with everyone here once we have that. Alongside those, the actual inspection activity, we have 2 annual engagement meetings every year. One of those is regarding our social care inspection framework. That took place in May this year, usually around the same time. We have a SEND annual engagement meeting looking at the SEND inspection framework, and that will happen later this year. And for both of those conversations, we have to prepare an updated self-evaluation, which we have to share with the inspectors a month before that meeting. And that self-evaluation is a comprehensive report about where we think we are in relation to the inspection standards, sort of contextual information, things that are changing in the local authority, and areas, things that are going well, areas for development. And they are really key documents. And on top of all of that, we also have our school inspections framework, which continues all the time. We have notifications every week of schools and colleges in the local area that are being inspected. But improving our services isn't really about the inspections. It's about us doing things better for children every time we do something, learning from things that are going well and things that aren't going well, looking at areas for development, and making sure that our action plans are improving services all the time. Because if we're doing things well, we're improving things for children. And if we're doing things well, we shouldn't have to worry about our inspections. Alongside, so what do we do to improve what do we do to prepare for our inspections? So we've got two improvement boards. We've got a social care and ascend improvement board, which meet regularly, looking at our overall improvement activity. We have regular inspection preparation meetings, and alongside the work of improvement, the things that you hear about here, the developments such as our social care academy, the recruitment that we're undertaking, so bringing down our proportion of agency staff. These are all things that have cropped up in previous inspections, and these are all things that are part of our business as usual, but are working towards our overall improvement. There are our self-evaluations at the moment have drawn from previous inspection activity and what we know from our quality assurance activity and what we see every day in our casework, given us some clear priorities. So for the moment, they are improved timeliness and better evidence decision making at the front door. You've heard me talk about that earlier in this meeting, about what we're doing to make that process smoother, and then hopefully will give us a more efficient and better decisions. Ensuring that the children's voice is evident in our assessments and plans. So can children influence the direction of their own journey through our services? Clear and well understood pathways to support children at risk of exploitation. There's a lot of work going on, not just in the local authority, but across the partnership to improve that for those children. And improving workforce stability, which I've already mentioned. We're reviewing our quality assurance processes, and we're developing better quality and better recording of our supervision of our staff. Safety valve, John's already spoken about, and as long with the improved timeliness for quality and quality of EHCPs, education, health and care plans. So those are some of the things that are going on. One of the most important things that we're doing at the moment, outside of that regular activity, is that we have the Department of Education has funded a sector-led improvement partner for us. In our case, it's Essex, who are completing what I put in the report as a full system diagnostic. Now, what that actually means in real terms is that Essex and our neighbouring local authority are outstanding, are looking at every single one of our teams. They're coming into me, every one of our social care teams, to look at the quality of their casework, meet with social workers and managers, and talk about what it's like delivering services in that team. And they're bringing together all of that information into reports which tell us what their view of the strengths are in those teams, and for what their view is of the areas for development. Now, this is really helpful for us to have an independent view of our practice, because Essex has been outstanding 2 inspections now, and they are very clear about what the difference is between delivering outstanding services and delivering services that are, inadequate or requires improvement. But certainly they know the direction that we need to travel in. And that work is ongoing at the moment. So by the end of this year, we will have a really strong self-evaluation, revised with information provided by Essex and our own intelligence about what we're doing. We will have our new permanently recruited leadership team. So we will have a really strong view of where we are and a really strong platform for going forward. We do lots of mock runs about data, making sure that we're able to provide the data that inspectors need when they arrive. They demand that information extremely quickly. The first week of an inspection is usually the busiest for the council in terms of delivering the information that the inspectors ask for, because they ask for a lot in a very short space of time. So if we prepare ourselves now, making sure that we can deliver that information, it makes the whole exercise run more smoothly. We do a lot of analysis of our own data so that we have a good understanding of where our strengths and weaknesses are in our KPIs, not just in the quality of practice that we're delivering. We share information about the inspection processes with our partners, with children and with their families as things develop, so that everyone knows what to expect when an inspection arrives. So going back to where I started, we know that from the frameworks that are already published, we know that the next 2 inspections that we can expect will be an ILACS inspection, the full inspection. So that will be not a focused visit. It will be a standard inspection, which is 2 weeks long, with a week of offsite activity as well. And also we'll be due for our SEND inspection. We don't obviously know when these inspections are going to come. Ofsted do not tell you. That's the point of them. So we can prepare for them all, which is why we have that preparation work, which I referred to, built into our daily business, so that whenever they notify us, we will be ready to respond and hopefully put our best foot forward. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the very full explanation. Apart from bringing these reports and updates to the committee, what member input is there into this whole process?
In the inspection process?
To the preparation for the inspection.
So when we've completed when Essex have completed their work and we've got our fully updated self-evaluation, we'll be sharing that with members. But at the moment, there isn't really a role for members other than understanding the position. It's very much for officers to support the service and have a clear understanding and share that with members, so that members are able to answer questions about it and feel informed. But I would think it would be difficult for members, and probably put members in a difficult position, to be involved in the inspection activity and the preparation.
Okay, so the next stage for members then is?
We'll share the, for social care, for example, we'll share the self-evaluation, and then you'll have a good understanding of where we think we are in relation to our service delivery. And after that, it will be notification of when Ofsted are here. Will everybody know when we receive notification, you will too.
Thank you. Canon Reid, please.
Thank you, Martin, for that clarity. It seems to me on this committee, there was a potential tension that we need to manage, is there not, in the sense that in terms of the importance of that regulatory visit, based on previous reports, it's going to be important for there to be a obvious improvement in outcomes in the context of what the regulator judges. This committee is quite accountable for those outcomes, not literally, but also politically, I would imagine. So I think that question about our involvement is really quite material, not just from the point of view of being supportive, but also from the point of view of not having any surprises. So I wonder how that process occurs, also in the context of the sensitivities of other organisations aren't required, I don't think, quite so much to live stream what they predict their Ofsted outcome is likely to be. So I just wonder how that's going to be managed moving forward, because we do know, don't we, that there were some aspects that you've highlighted there that we are concerned about making some significant improvements on. Some of it's to do with existential challenges we've received from the sector.
So thank you for the question. So many of those work streams that I've had do have member involvement in those boards. So some members are helping to push forward the improvements and monitoring that and adding that level of accountability and oversight, which is helpful and challenging at the same time, which is good. But yeah, I agree. I don't know if I have an answer for the second part of what you're saying, that it's really difficult to manage that the expectation of information sharing and challenge without I don't think anyone else would reveal what their self-evaluation is in a group like this. But I think that we would happily work through those boards with any member inquiry whatsoever.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I think we can see there's an awful lot of work going into this, and part of bringing this today was to fully explain how much goes on behind the scenes with children's services, and obviously that children are at the heart of everything that we do. Feels like we've talked a lot about the business aspect of it, but that is also key part of what we do. We've been asked to note the preparations for future government inspections of children's services, which I feel we have done. So moving to item 9. Item 9 is our final item of business today and covers the committee's agenda plan, training plan and appointments. I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer to report any changes to the published agenda, please.
Thank you, Chair. 3 changes to report. The small school strategy has been added to the agenda plan for the November meeting. I think John mentioned that earlier. Children's residential strategy options paper has been removed from the November meeting. Oh, excuse me, no committee decision is required at this stage. And business planning will be considered in January 2024.
Thank you. Do we have any comments on the agenda plan? No. In which case we move to the committee training plan. Do we have any comments on the training plan? I know that we discussed this morning possibility of having some training around the business planning, which will happen in January, but we will let people know once that's decided and sorted at the next meeting. Councillor Slatter.
Yes, it's partly about a matter of training and partly on the outside bodies. If I may introduce SACRE, the standing, advisory committee on RE, and these days we do tack on world views. I think there would be a good case for a member briefing online. People will opt into just to explain what's going on with RE these days and the responsibilities, the statutory responsibilities of this council in that issue. And it's not, of course, just RE and the curriculum that we just produced, which was on the which you saw last meetings, but also the responsibilities for the corporate worship in our schools. And so I think some briefing there, so we understand the law, would be very useful, because otherwise I think it's a tiny minority of the council that is involved in this, and yet it is something that can get difficult sometimes in some places, and that basic information is useful, and it does come on later, Chair, to the outside bodies.
Thank you. We note that. So committee appointments, we did speak earlier in the meeting about the work of the Cambridgeshire SEND Executive Board, the CESB, for those who like an acronym. The membership includes the chair of Children and Young People's Committee, so I'd like to formally seek the committee's agreement for me to be your representative on this new body. I think we need a proposer and seconder.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to propose Councillor Goodliffe's appointment to this new body.
Thank you. You're happy, Shmishanda? There were lots of hands.
I think Councillor Slatter to second, I think.
Thank you.
Do we need to probably check if there's any objections? No.
No.
Thank you.
In which case, the final item today on our agenda is the local authority school governor nominations between April and July, which have been included in the meeting papers for noting. As always, I'd like to thank everyone who puts himself forward to be a school governor. I did my stint and would like to place on record the thanks and recognition for the invaluable work that school governors do. And if anyone would like to take up a post, please do speak to us. We have some vacancies for you. Any comments or questions on these appointments? No, that brings us to the end of today's business.
Sorry, Chair, you haven't mentioned the outside bodies, which is on page 121, which is where we have a vacancy on SACRE. It's a persistent vacancy. For the last 2 years, and because it's partly caused by the fact that there's a requirement in the constitution of our SACRE to have party balance according to the elected representatives. If this requirement was not there, it would be easier to fill the vacancies. The chair of SACRE would like to ask for a change in the constitution. This obviously will require some officer input, but it would be interesting to know how the committee responds to that, because it obviously is better to have volunteers than conscripts. And we do need people who are engaged in the activity. Not only that, but if we're not quorate, then the councillors are guilty of stopping the business. And that is extremely embarrassing if we don't have councillors turning up.
Thank you, and we'll take that away, and I'm happy to talk to the chair of that committee going forward.
Thank you.
The committee is next due to meet on Tuesday, the 28th of November, and I now declare this meeting closed. Thanks, everybody.